Hi, I'm John Blackburn, and this is a notes episode of Entertainment Matters. These shorter episodes are inspired by conversations I've had with guests on the podcast. What I'm doing here is pulling out a few ways of thinking, decisions, attitudes, shifts in perspective that seem to have led to real outcomes. Sometimes it's something practical like a plan or a set of precise steps, and sometimes it's more about values or philosophy. But the aim is always the same, to look at how things actually get made, how ideas can help us move forward, and what we can notice about that whole process. So this is less, here's what to do, and it's more, here's something interesting. What do you think? So in this week's notes episode, I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm going to talk about compliments. Um, I'm going to expand it out a bit later to feedback in general, including criticism. But I want to start with compliments. I was very lucky to be on a show with some friends recently, Clang. And in one of the breaks, as we ate our, as you might imagine, steamed broccoli and chicken with couscous, um, the subject of compliments came up. And then, sure enough, a couple of weeks later, it's come up in a couple of client coaching sessions as well. It turns out a lot of creatives, I would say especially musicians, are very bad at taking a compliment. We might be very good at politely responding to compliments, but we're not very good at allowing ourselves to enjoy them necessarily. Now, we probably have a mix of good and bad reasons for not taking compliments. And when I say reasons, I don't mean in a sort of delve back into the depths of your past and analyze whether or not you believed your family when they told you you'd done something well. I just mean in a very sort of practical here and now way. What are the mechanisms around how we receive compliments and indeed later feedback in general? In fact, you could think of a compliment as an unsolicited positive in the same way that we occasionally encounter unsolicited negatives. I think that treating those two things, the unsolicited compliment and the unsolicited criticism, treating those two things in the same way is fairly common. I've quite regularly said to myself something on the lines of, if I wouldn't accept a compliment from them, I'm certainly not going to accept a criticism from them. And that's because I myself had a fairly high bar for accepting criticism. And I'm not suggesting that it's true for anyone else, but just from my own experience, part of that for me was probably it gave me a little buffer against criticism. I think it probably justified internally my not paying that much attention to unsolicited criticism, by also not really listening to unsolicited compliments. But actually, of course, it turns out that accepting positive feedback when it arrives, it can be quite nice and it makes you feel good. And when you feel good, you're likely to perform better. A quite common thing is to only really accept compliments from people that we feel share our technical understanding and our values. Sometimes, in fact, uh, we will only accept a compliment if it comes from someone that we sort of respect more than we respect ourselves or our immediate peers, which, as you can imagine, with me saying that out loud, sounds ridiculous. And part of that is we are all, not just speaking about musicians, but speaking about anybody in entertainment, we are all probably quite invested in the craft of what we do. We take it very seriously. We've probably dedicated quite a lot of our lives to it. And part of that process involves self reflection and self critique, for want of a better expression. What happens, of course, is we continue that sort of internal scoring, sometimes further than it needs to. However, we also have to bear in mind that the technical bits, the bits that we have the direct control over, the craft, all of those things, they are they are really important. But of course, the technical accomplishment of the performance isn't the point. It's the thing we have control over. It's the thing that we're the bit of the craft that we're most dedicated to and interested in. But the point of the thing is the effect it has on another person, an audience. Our technical values, with all of our deep understanding about how things are supposed to be, may not be the same values of the overall piece of work that we're actually a part of. The real value of the work that we all do is in the effect that it creates for an audience. And quite often, a compliment is really an expression of the effect that you have been part of creating, rather than the technical score that the person saying well done is giving you. Sometimes it's expressed in terms that make us think that what they're talking about is what your tone happened to be like on this particular tune, or that you played a great fill, or that the groove felt great, or that you three at the side of the stage were so in sync, or it's expressed in a technical way, which is what leads us, I think, to sort of run a technical comparison about whether they're correct or not before we enjoy the compliment. In most cases, sometimes even from other professionals, what's really being expressed is an appreciation for the effect of what we did. And you know what? An audience member, whoever they are, is allowed and correct when they express an appreciation for the effect that you have created. We actually don't get to judge that because we're not them. We have no idea whether our contributions to a thing have created the desired effect unless we get some kind of feedback. Now, some of the feedback is smiles on faces, applause, standing ovations, immediate ticket sales for the next version of the show. There are lots of different kinds of feedback we can use to assess the effect of the work that we've done. And an audience, anyone's compliment, when thought about in that way, is completely valid, and you're allowed to enjoy it. Someone bothering to give you a compliment, especially if it's an audience member or someone that we think maybe doesn't understand all the mechanics of what we do, they've taken the time to hang around at the end of a show, and they've tried to get your attention. And it might be, we all know what the end of gigs and shows are like. It might be that they tried to get your attention for some time and they couldn't because you were busy doing the usual packing down and end of show things. But someone, if they pay you a compliment, it has gone to some personal effort and cost to express that something you have done meant something to them. This is real and it is valuable. Now, I'm going to use this moment just to bridge us into talking about, now that we've talked about the sort of unsolicited positive, to talk about the unsolicited negative, the criticism. As I've mentioned in other places a few times before, when it comes to feedback of any sort, positive or negative, it's worth deciding in advance, I think, what feedback you are interested in what form, and from whom. It's also worth reminding ourselves as we make decisions about what feedback we're interested in, that not all work is for all people. So yes, in the same way that before we talked about the fact that the source of a compliment is often a big part in how people deal with a compliment, it's also true that the source of the criticism matters. Who is it coming from? Are they in the arena, as Brené Brown put it? Do they know what they're talking about? Or are they simply expressing enjoyment or lack thereof? Timing of criticism is also a funny one, isn't it? So if you've just finished performing a show, doing a piece of work, and you haven't even sat down and had a cup of tea yet, or maybe you're miles away from home and you've just run out, you've got change, and you're now back on stage packing up, or even if you're out selling CDs or something out front, you may not be personally in the state yet where you can usefully deal with feedback of any description. Sometimes it might be worth, if there is criticism to be had, it might be worth literally writing it down and forgetting about it, and then just coming back to it at a time of your choosing, and then engaging with who was it that said it? Are they in the arena? Are they talking about something that they understand, i.e., their experience, or are they trying to talk about something that they don't really understand? If they're trying to talk about something that they don't really understand, a bit like with a compliment in those situations, are they trying to find reasons for a deeper discomfort that they can't explain? Ultimately, is this criticism worth noting or not? So, yeah, unsolicited criticism is completely okay not to take on board in the moment. And if you think there's any chance of it being worth paying attention to later, just make a note of it in your phone and forget about it until the right time. Criticism from non professional technical sources is most often about effect, not about your craft and your ability. And to loop us back around to compliments, um, I don't think it is true that all feedback, all compliments, all criticism is created equal. I don't think it is true that you actually have to treat compliment and criticism as the same thing. I probably did for a long time. There are circumstances when I still will use the same filter and the same way of thinking about it. But I don't think we should pretend it's a rule that it's meant to be like that or that it has to be like that. People who don't know what they're talking about are going to compliment you. Now, so are people who do know what they're talking about, but it's actually okay to enjoy both. And now we get to maybe one of the fun parts, which is if we can try on the idea that allowing yourself to enjoy a compliment is A, okay, and B, probably useful. Um, how could we do that? What could we do to enjoy a compliment? The first thing is if someone says something nice, before you disregard their opinion based on how many years they spent at RADA, right? I wonder what it would be like if you did allow yourself that moment of joy when someone bothers to express that they've enjoyed something about your contribution and what you've done. And what you could do is, as you take that deep breath in and smile, you could just replay the compliment in your head exactly the way they've just said it. Don't change it, don't change the tone. Just try and replicate the sound that they made out of their mouths when they said the nice thing. See them saying it again in your head. And just in the moment of that breath, just allow yourself to enjoy it for a second and then see what happens. Now, many of you know me fairly well, and I love to threaten a good time. So if you want to really play around with this, do this not when you are driving, do this when it is safe to do so, but just try this little game. Remember a time, an example of someone paying you a compliment, even if it was just a small thing, and maybe make it one where you sort of dismissed it. You didn't pay it much attention. When it's safe to do so, replay the compliment and see how it feels. Take the same words, the same compliment about the same moment, the same gig. And this time, imagining someone that you really respect saying it to you. So put it in their voice, imagine them, see them saying it to you, and hear them saying exactly the same words in reference to the same performance or the same moment, whatever it was. And just hear it, let it loop a few times, and notice that that feels different. Notice that even if you don't 100% agree with the content of the compliment, the fact that someone else is saying it, someone that you have some respect for, the fact that someone else like that is saying it does alter the way you feel about that compliment. And what you've got there, of course, is the idea that maybe it wasn't completely the message, but in fact, simply the messenger that was the problem for you in taking that compliment. That is also a way to deal with criticism. Do the opposite. If someone says something unhelpful to you or they say it at the wrong time, and if it's bothering you, do the opposite of that. Imagine someone that you could not possibly take seriously. These days, our friends in North America have offered us a number of people where it's very easy not to take them seriously. And just imagine that person or someone like that with their voice and exaggerate the voice, see them saying it to you, someone that you could just not possibly take seriously. Yeah, I know the classic examples are to imagine Daffy Duck saying it with that, that ridiculous voice. And just try it as an experiment. See what the difference in feeling is, even though it's the same words, when you sort of replay it, but coming from someone ridiculous. And doing that doesn't mean that you can't then examine that feedback to see whether it's actually useful or not. In fact, taking the stinging feeling out of criticism or the negative feedback might actually allow you to benefit from that information. It will certainly give you a clearer head and a clearer way to judge whether or not to take the feedback seriously. So, to finish up and to return completely to compliments, if someone comes over to your house and you bake them a cake, and at the end of the meal, they've had the cake, they say, "Oh, my word, that cake was delicious. Thank you very much." You probably do not sit there and go, well, the thing is, actually, when I was whisking the mixture, my hand was at a 45-degree angle, and really to get the most air in the mixture, it should have been a 35-degree angle. You would not do that. You would just say, "Great, thanks very much." And you might even allow yourself that moment of enjoyment that you have created something that has had the desired effect. No one cares how you whisked the mix. They care whether the cake tastes good. And on a gig, if someone comes up and pays you a compliment, they are telling you the cake was delicious. You are allowed to enjoy that. If you'd like to be notified when there's a new episode, whether it's a full conversation or one of these Entertainment Matters Notes episodes, you can sign up for the Entertainment Matters Cue Sheet using the link in the description. That's where I share updates, ideas, and the occasional extra thought that doesn't quite make it into the episode. Thanks for listening, and thanks as always for whatever you do to make live entertainment happen. See you next time.